Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 140.
And this week, it's Daisy's turn to share something with us. Daisy, what do you have?
Well, Terry, do you ever get that feeling that your tech is watching you? Now, we all know that Google and Facebook talk about us behind our backs and put adverts in. You know what it's like. You've only got to have Googled something and 5 minutes later you're scrolling down through Facebook and miraculously an ad appears for the thing you've just been looking at. So we all know that tech does watch us. This is one of the reasons why I refuse to have an Alexa. I'm sure she doesn't listen to you while you're asleep and, ply you with subliminal messages, but a part of me thinks that she might. So that's and she's a bit annoying and goes off and does things on her own accord. I've seen this in action in other people's places. The only very amusing thing that you can get Alexa to do is do different fart noises. Have you ever done that?
I have not, because I do not have an Alexa.
Well, next time you visit somebody who has an Alexa, for 5-10 minutes of endless hilarity, ask her to fart, and she has a selection of farts. I learned this at my sister's house. My nephews were having great fun getting her to do a variety of different farts. It's probably more Brits are notorious for liking toilet humour, so I'm sure it appeals to me more than it appeals to you, but that's about the only good thing I can say about Alexa. Anyway, I've gone off on a big old sidetrack there. Tech watching me, that's right. So after your episode from last week, and after I also touched upon the importance of connection in the regrets episode, if you remember Daniel H., not to forget the H, Pink's biggest takeaway from his study as far as regrets go was the importance of reconnecting with those relationships that might have drifted apart. And he said that that was his biggest takeaway, that it's always worth reaching out. So we've been talking a lot about connection and relationships. So into my email inbox dropped one of the newsletters that I do actually tend to read from the Next Big Idea Club, which is an online magazine, and I've shared from it before. They have a series called Book Bites, in which the authors share usually 5 key insights from their new book. And in this case, the authors are Mark Schultz and Robert Waldinger. Mark Schultz is a professor of psychology and also director of data science at Bryn Mawr College. Robert Waldinger is professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, director of the Harvard Study of Development at Massachusetts General Hospital, and the co-founder of the Lifespan Research Foundation. And they are sharing 5 key insights from their new book, which is called The Good Life: Lessons from the World's Largest Scientific Study of Happiness. And basically, it's all about the importance of connection and relationships. And like I say, this reminded me of recent episodes that we've recorded. So what are these 5 key insights? The first one: relationships keep us happier and healthier across our lifespan, and loneliness erodes our health. Well, that sounds familiar. This is what you were talking about last week. And what they say is, if they could boil down the findings of 84 years of the Harvard study into what is the most important life investment, it would be that good relationships keep us healthier and happier. Science shows that the absence of good relationships diminishes our health and well-being. And people who are more isolated than they want to be find their health declining sooner than people who feel connected to others. And chronic loneliness increases a person's chances of death in any given year by 26%. And you also quoted various figures last week, didn't you? So a lot of overlap with what you were talking about, but I felt it was quite an important subject to revisit from a slightly different direction or perspective.
Interesting. One of the things that you said in there is if people have less connection than they want to have.
Yes, I noticed that.
It makes me wonder, what about people who don't want connection and don't have it? Are the outcomes different for them? Like, is part of it the longing for connection and the valuing it but not having it? Is that part of the negative impact?
Yes, exactly. That's something that I noticed too. And then there's also that big grey murky area in the middle that got me thinking, from what you were talking about last week, was whether you're thinking that you don't need that interaction, but maybe your brain is lying to you a bit. So yes, more questions than answers there.
More studies. More studies.
More studies, yeah. Yes, I don't know. You probably know about this study, but 84 years. It sounds like they didn't really... I should have gone and Googled to find out more about it, but from what I could make out, it's... and there have been studies done in the UK along similar lines where they basically follow the same group of people and check in with them, I think, I don't know, maybe every 10 years or something, and ask them a series of questions. But yes, 84 years this study has spanned. Yeah, so apparently 1 in 4 Americans report feeling lonely. And here in Great Britain, we even appointed a Minister of Loneliness. This was huge in the news a few years ago, to address this major public health challenge. I mean, maybe, just maybe, they might want to pay nurses properly. That might address the big major health challenge we have at the moment. But I won't start going on a political rant. But big shout out to the nurses out there. I support you in your striking action. So, cultivating warm relationships, I'm quoting them, that was their term, is one of the best things you can do for your health and happiness. The second key insight is that relationships don't just take care of themselves, they require active maintenance and renewal. And again, this is something that you touched upon. But they say, just like muscles, neglected relationships tend to weaken. And they mention regret, so they tap into similar things that Daniel H. Pink was talking about. And they said that the biggest regret cited in the Harvard study participants when they reached their 70s and 80s was that they wish they had taken better care of their relationships. So just like Daniel H. Pink was talking about, that was his biggest takeaway, and the highest on the list of when people were talking about their regrets was this loss of connection. So like I say, there is some repetition from what you were saying, but also, like I said, there's just, just that slightly different perspective and something that I felt worth reinforcing. But they touched upon that assessing our social fitness requires a bit more sustained self-reflection. Taking stock of our relationships and being honest with ourselves about where we are spending our time and whether we are tending to the connections that are important for our health. And that it is important to ask ourselves what we find challenging in our relationships so that we can maybe start making a commitment to doing better. And I thought that was interesting because, of course, we all tend to bump up against challenges in relationships. And that takes us on to the third key insight, which is that relationships of all kinds matter, but all relationships come with challenges. And you say that relationships serve so many different functions and help us in so many ways that we are unlikely to get all that we need from just one person. We benefit from all sorts of relationships. As you discussed last week, some different categories of relationships, but they all come with challenges. People are messy. Differences of opinion are inevitable. Relationships, of course, bring love and joy, but they can also bring pain and frustration and all sorts of other things. A good life, they say, is forged from the things that make it hard. And this is, Nadia always quotes one of her favourite things that you say is, we can do hard things. And challenges are opportunities for growth, something that we talk about a lot. And learning how to navigate relationship challenges a bit better is a key part of this growth. So on to key insight number 4. Our attention is our most precious resource. So how best to spend our time and attention? They talk about doing a quick tally of how we spend our time. How much time do we spend connecting with the people that we care about? And then, on the other side of the table, how much time do we spend on social media, watching television, doing jigsaw puzzles, looking at you, Terry Lance, doing, which is an app that I'm just going to have to remove from my iPad, colouring in apps, which turn out to be highly addictive. You, of course, do get to decide how you spend your time. But before you feel judged, I know I started to feel judged when I was reading this, one step at a time. This is another thing that we talk about a lot, the importance of small steps. And here they do actually make a suggestion. It's another one of these, one of these articles or discussions where they sort of hint at things you can do, but don't necessarily give you a black and white step of what you can do. But here is one. They suggest developing your curiosity and reaching out to people, be that family, friends, acquaintances, even strangers, with one thoughtful question at a time. With these small moments of devoted, authentic attention, you strengthen your own life. I thought that was quite interesting. They didn't delve into it. Its newsletter is always fairly brief, but that certainly got me thinking. One thoughtful question. Because yes, if you do ask a thoughtful question, and what do you mean by thoughtful question? But a question really, isn't it, that's very specific. It shows that you've thought about that very specifically to a person. It's not only like something they're going to have to think about to answer, but if you ask the right question, it's very telling, isn't it, to that other person that they've considered you. It is that authentic moment. It's not just a general throwaway, how are you doing kind of question.
Well, and the fact that I think it shows that you have a vested interest in connecting. You're probing a little deeper. You're asking something, more thought-provoking, more facilitative of understanding each other or understanding them. And so I think it sets a good tone, shows them investment on your part.
Yes, and it's definitely something that enriches your own life. I think I might have shared this story before, but I can remember going out to dinner with somebody. I helped him sell his place in France, and he wasn't the most interesting of characters. And he asked me out to dinner, and I thought it was rude to decline, but I wasn't exactly looking forward to spending a few hours of my time with him. But I thought, no, go along, apart from the fact that there was a nice meal on offer. There is a way you can have an enjoyable evening. And the way to do that is just to be interested, find out about this person. And so that's exactly what I did. Someone who can maybe appear to us as not being very interesting is bound to be interesting. They are bound to have interesting things about them. And the onus is on you to ask the right questions. So that's what I did. And I had a very enjoyable evening finding out some interesting things about this person. So there you go. It's, it's also easy to be a little bit dismissive, isn't it? But sometimes it's us who need to put in the hard work to show the other person that we're genuinely interested. And I think there is a big difference, isn't there? And that's what it got me thinking about this devoted, authentic attention of your time, asking questions that show that you're genuinely interested.
I think the other thing that your example demonstrates, on the woo-woo side of things, a little bit more about the kind of the law of attraction, that you kind of get what you're looking for. You create or you experience how you set it up.
Yeah.
And if I go into a situation saying, this person is so boring, I'm just going to find 100 examples of how boring they are.
Exactly.
But by going into that as you did, I'm looking for getting to know some interesting things. I'm going to find the interesting things. Sure, you found some boring things still, but because your frame of reference, the antenna that you put out there was to draw in your awareness to the interesting things, you were able to do that. So setting that intention is even a big part of this.
And also, of course, it taps into what you were saying about people who lack confidence, who often can have an appearance of being maybe, dull, disinterested. All the rest of it to other people might just be a defense mechanism. And maybe it's for you to chip through that and break away at that and find out what's underneath. So the last key insight is that it's never too late to improve your connection with others. And for this last insight, they just share an example about a chap called Andrew Deering, who is one of the study participants. And apparently he lived one of the most isolated lives of all the participants. His family moved a lot when he was a child, so he didn't get a chance to develop lasting friendships. He continued to struggle as an adult to develop meaningful relationships, even after getting married in his 30s. He was asked in his mid-60s to describe his closest friends and what they meant to him. And all Andrew wrote was no one. At 67, he was forced to retire due to health problems. But his job was one of the few sources of pleasure and connection. So this was a great loss for him. And about the same time, he also decided to end his marriage. So now he was even lonelier. But then he decided he was going to start going to a nearby gym. And 3 months later, Andrew knew everybody there and he looked forward to seeing them every time he went. And he soon also discovered that a few people that also went to the gym shared his love for old movies. And he started to get together with some of them for movie nights. When they checked back in with Andrew in his 80s for this study and asked him how often he left his home to see others or had people visit him, he answered daily. So there was a big change from the nobody that he wrote down, or the no one rather, 20 years earlier. So the big takeaway from that was that it's never too late to make changes. And this, I think, really tapped into the last type of connection that you spoke about last week, is finding these groups, we were talking about, weren't we, the real difference between going to school as a child and just being in that environment where it was so much easier to, in general anyway, to make friends. But it does tend to be a lot more difficult as we get older. And, again, as we talked about, the workplace is often somewhere where we can find that connection. So, when he didn't have friends outside the workplace and he lost his job and he had to find something else. And that's where the going somewhere, that shared experience, a shared hobby, a shared activity. And then before he knew it, he discovered, some other shared activities, and you go on and on from there. So like I say, quite a few things there that are repeats or coming at from a slightly different perspective of things that we've talked about before, but it felt like an important subject to revisit.
I feel like based on the importance, the research that was recapped in what you were looking at, the research that was recapped in what I was looking at, it feels to me like this is a topic that is worth visiting often and from different angles. And I think both of us have already pointed out from the things that we read or listened to that there are not always hard and fast, simple fixes for this. But there are ways to encourage people to interact. There are ways to encourage people to explore things. But I think just emphasizing the valuing of creating some opportunity for connection and some insight or invitations to improve the quality of our social connections. It seems to me like this is a growing body of information that we're going to keep running into. And so I'm guessing you and I, this will not be the last time we talk about it in some way here, because it's really important. And it's some of those soft skills in life that we don't really get training on, you know.
No, exactly. So our homework this week is to go and ask somebody a thoughtful question. And until next time, I hope you have a very wonderful week.
You too, Daisy. Take good care, everybody.
But they say just like muscles, neglected relation. Thanks. It's coming out both ends. I've got the just general aroma of farts and then also a cough. She is surprised.
And she might have weed while she did all of that.
Yeah, that'll be the next thing. Little bit of wee comes out when you cough. Happens to us all, Bets.